And we're live.
Awesome. Hi, Jane. We have
Hi
everybody
Brian.
joining here. Can I start the introduction formally here?
Yeah, we should be live, and let's get it going.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. I don't know where in the world you are, but I'm in the US, and it's early in the morning. So if you're in the US like me, thank you so much for getting up early, unless you're watching the replay of this, and then, well, it's kind of irrelevant. I'm Brian Sierakowski. I'm at Baremetrics. If you don't know already, Baremetrics is a tool. We take the fire hose of SaaS analytics data that you have, and we turn that into insights so that you can make good decisions with your business. I'm here with Jane from Userlist. I'm really excited about Userlist. There's a lot of different like customer messaging tools out there. But it seems like all of them don't really quite understand that multiple people exist within a company. A company is comprised of individuals. So Userlist is taking the novel approach of let's not spam the same message to every single person in a company, every single role. Let's actually kind of understand that companies are made up of people, and let's message accordingly. So I'm really excited about Userlist. I'm excited about this conversation we're about to have. And I will stop talking and pass it over to Jane now.
Thanks so much for the warm intro, Brian, and thanks everyone for joining. I know we have some folks from Userlist crowd and some folks from the Baremetrics crowd. It's awesome to have you all. And today we're going to talk about automating your customer success efforts. And let me share my screen and do a little presentation about that. And we do have the Q&A questions tab open. So if you would like to, we have a Q&A time planned in the end. So please do drop your questions. We'll take a look afterwards. And with that, let me share the presentation. Okay, awesome. Brian, if you could hang in there and let me know if something goes wrong and I keep talking to the black screen.
Absolutely. I'll call out. So far, so good.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So we're going to talk about customer success, and customer success does not equal customer support. Everyone has to do customer support. We're not obligated to do customer success, which doesn't mean that it's less important. But however, it really causes some problems because it's a never-ending battle because new customers keep coming. You have to keep relationships with all of them. And the biggest problem, especially for early stage companies, is that it requires human touch, requires some high touch effort, requires skills, power, time, hours, and not everybody has resources for that. So the common solution, unfortunately, to that is basically do nothing. They can't afford a dedicated customer success manager. The founder is too busy. They do nothing at all. And that results in poor adoption and high churn, which means that you spend thousands of dollars on driving traffic, converting people to customers, and then the trials don't convert to paid, and then newly acquired paying customers might churn after a few months because they don't see value in the tool. And unfortunately, all of us who run products are not really exempt from occasional churn, but it's always painful when the user says that they don't receive value from the tool. So customer success is there to free you up from that. But it's a high touch problem. So what do we do to solve that? And a solution to 90% of that is customer success automation. Because with the good software, you can make that software do 90% of the work for you. The software can track people's activity, and the software can be the one who initiates those conversations, interactions, all kinds of different things that typically a customer success manager would be doing. They would be tracking success of individual accounts, and instead you can make software do that. So in this workshop today, we will take 10,000 feet view of this automation problem and how you can solve it for your business. And of course, every SaaS business is special, but still there are so many common patterns. Maybe we can cover some of those patterns today, and then you can come back and apply it to to your own product. It's going to be tool agnostic. Of course, we're biased. We run Userlist, which is an automation tool, but you can absolutely make it happen with any other tool that you already have in your SaaS tool stack. So the first step, of course, is do it high touch, manually. Meaning, for the first 10, 20, 50 customers, the early days of your product, you will most likely be doing it manually with everybody. You will be having high-touch manual conversations with new trials. You will have customer success calls, and this will allow you to do customer development, to learn about their needs, and to see where they get stuck. And you don't even need to implement any tracking at this point. Basically, all you're learning is just from the conversations. They will tell you where the problem lies, or you can identify those. So as this time goes by, you will learn many things, and you will also be able to build your assets. Because essentially, automations consists of two equally important parts. One is the support assets, which can really vary from things that can be consumed by the customer on their own, such as help docs, posts, guides, worksheets, or videos, to a variety of different tools that the person can activate and involve your team, but they will be the one scheduling the call, et cetera, So you will be reaching out to them automatically, and they will be able to take part. This means different kinds of calls, workshops, webinars, et cetera, up to concierge setup, which is also something that you can do. But even with concierge setup, you don't have to be the one offering it. It can be offered automatically. And then people who are interested can reach back to you and make it happen. We recently wrote a post for Baremetrics blog outlining different things you can leverage if you don't have much resources on your hand. And there was a big part of the blog post dedicated to different group calls. So your customer success demos don't have to be one-on-one, and you don't have to spend hours of your time there. You can have group calls for the demos. You can have group calls for the onboarding. You can have weekly office hours to ensure that your existing customers can reach out to you. And this helps you to invest just a handful of hours in a week and get personal communications with those customers that really need it. Then once you have your idea of the customer and some assets that you can help them with, you should prepare to automate. With that, do pick a tool. This can be any behavior-based email automation tool, because email is the underlying structure behind all this automation. So it can be Userlist, can be Intercom, Customer.io, Drip. You can make ConvertKit work. You can make MailChimp work if you want to. So like you can make anything work. Some of this will be better, some of this will be not. But pick a tool that you can enrich with some customer data, basically, and then use it for email automation. Another part is mapping the user journey, and we will talk about that in a moment. And another part that goes hand in hand is drafting a simple tracking plan. Tracking plan sounds intimidating, but essentially it's a list of custom fields and custom events that are required to identify and to trigger those moments in the customer lifecycle. If you run a photo editing app, it could be as easy as, tracking the number of photos there or number of projects. And when that is more than 0, essentially means that the person is using a feature. So all kinds of feature flags and things like that can help you identify whether the user is engaging or not at scale using the software. Now I want to give you an overview of the customer journey. And every SaaS business is super unique. On the other hand, there are so many of them alike in that regard that they either use the free trial or the freemium model to drive their customers in. In all our workshops, we try to drive home this particular screen with the journey and the segments that depict, the key lifecycle stages. Most likely, they will be similar for your product as well. And you may use different properties to identify that, but in the end of the road, you will most likely have the segment of trialing users, segment of people with expiring trials, then people who are paying, and advanced users who have, some high numbers in their use case. The idea is that segments and campaigns will go hand in hand. Basically, when somebody joins a segment, you have something to help them with. So when they join the trialing users campaign, trialing users segment, you send them the basic onboarding campaign. When they join the paying customers, you send them another campaign that is more about customer success, that tells them about advanced features. And when they join the super advanced users campaign, you will send them you will send them another campaign. Just the idea of understanding it before you even open up your automation tool, helps achieve some clarity in your mind. Your idea is to segment your users by their lifecycle stage and provide them with relevant content on each stage. This is the same screenshot, but for the freemium model, you will see that the segments are slightly different. You will have a large portion of the free users in your user base. Among those, you will have activated free users, those who have started receiving value from your tool. So to them, you will be sending some sales pitches and things that will promote their upgrade to the paid plan. So once you're on board with this journey, customer map, I invite you to automate your customer success in two parts. One part is automate the basic user onboarding, which means help people who are arriving start getting value from your app. And we've already seen that the basic onboarding campaign is something that everybody received at the beginning of their user journey. But I'd like you to take a closer look at this campaign and see how it actually works, how it's implemented inside the email tool. The first one or two messages you can send to everybody, and then that's exactly where customer behavior data starts to play out. If they're not using feature A, you can offer them help for feature A. In a couple days, if they're not using feature B, you can offer them help for feature B. This is as simple as possible, but essentially you're doing the job of a customer success agent there. You're tracking their success on feature A. If they're not successful, you offer them help. Again, you can pick a relevant asset from your library that you have and offer them. You can offer them training material, or you can offer them a high-touch call, but it's still going to be much more effective than trying to track every new customer and offer that to them manually. The trial expiring campaign is a separate thing, because typically we try and attach it to the trial expiring date. And that can change, especially when people request to change their extended trial or something like that. So you always want to kind of uncouple those trial expiration emails from the remaining part of your onboarding campaign. This is the classic onboarding campaign in a nutshell. It's very similar to linear drip sequence that everybody does, but this behavior-based component, this ability to check in at certain times, it makes it much better, and if you implement something like that, you'll be already way ahead of many other SaaS products out there. The second part happens throughout the lifecycle. When the customer successfully activated, started receiving some value, comes the lifecycle, and this is like an indefinite span when the people are with you as customers. And it's very tempting to just leave them alone, but you really should still make brand touch points at this stage. So we do have onboarding calls with our users as well. And they often ask us, so I did set up this basic onboarding campaign. I did set up like trial expiring campaign. What do I do next? This is like all that I'm paying for? Like, what can I do next with people who are receiving value already? And if in the next few slides, I'm gonna inspire you with some ideas what can be happening. So for those touch points that will be sprinkled occasionally through the customer journey, two things matter. One is being sent at the right time. And for that, you can use different milestones, which can be either high energy or low energy. High energy milestones means that the user has been doing something well. They achieved a certain usage milestone. It might be either celebrating their 100th project, or celebrating an anniversary with the tool, or anything like sending an extraordinary amount of photos in 1 month. So basically something that makes the user excited. Low energy moments are on the opposite, either complete inactivity, so you need to re-engage them, or something like, I don't know, downgrading or any other sad moments that are occurring. You can still use those because it will be still better, and any interaction at this point is better than no interaction. Basically, that's the idea. So the right time and the right call to action. The classic recommendation for email marketing is one call to action per email. And we recommend you to stick to that. Keep your emails short and make it action oriented. Drive home a certain action in the end of each email. And we're going to discuss in a few moments what kind of actions they can be. One of the biggest mistakes is sending like gigantic newsletters, which have plenty of interesting content, but they really test the attention span of the reader. And if you try to promote something like a webinar in the end of a newsletter, you will notice that the conversion rate is miserable. In order, for example, to drive engagement to anything, you will need to make it a dedicated email and make it obvious what the next step can be. This is a book by not so new, by the way. I think it's like 10 years old or something. It's a book by Gary Vaynerchuk. It's called Jab, 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 Right Hook. And that's like the essence of my advice, to balance what you ask with what you can give to the users. Because you can provide value, not only in the form of, we will talk about this later, not only by telling them to use certain feature, which almost never is enough of an incentive, but you can also create many other things. So you should balance what you're giving with what you're asking for. And you can give many different things. You can offer them training calls. You can offer them some resources. You can invite them to events. You can invite them to become your affiliates. You can send them discounts. You can send them swag, any kind of thing. Definitely not all in one email, but just think how many opportunities you have to provide little bits of brand building into the journey throughout. When they kind of already settled on using your app, they're fine. It can be a really delightful surprise. And you can be asking for feedback at any stage. It can be a survey or an open-ended question, or it can be an invitation for a customer development call when you can tell the feedback to share the feedback with the founders, for example. It could be asking for referrals, could be asking for testimonials, could be asking for reviews on like Cupter, another review site, anything like that. All of these make wonderful causes for communication. And you shouldn't be afraid of asking, because when people do something for your brand, for your team, they build a relationship. Even if they're doing something, they become invested. So it's a really good opportunity either way. So you should be balancing those. Don't be afraid to ask, and definitely don't forget to give. That's probably the core of what we want to convey here today. A few final points of advice. One is start simple. Pick a tool, implement just a handful of core feature flags to make it possible to track user progress. Set up just a handful of campaigns and go from there, because it's virtually impossible to build a complex automation system from scratch. It will always be a result of iteration, building on something, etc., etc. Another advice is to think about companies, not users. And I'm very glad that Brian mentioned that in the beginning of the webinar. Of course, it's our special sauce because our software allows you to do that really well. For example, here is a screenshot where you can see that a company is something that can have progress on their own, and users are merely parts of the company. For example, one person can be an admin and they can be basically just starting the account and doing nothing. Another person is an editor. They're doing all the work. The third person is handling the billing. Two of these three people, if you explore them individually, are not successful because they're doing nothing. While the whole account, in fact, is really successful because there is work happening on the company level. So your automation efforts should consider that. And the best way to think about companies is to segment companies instead of users. And when something happens on the company level, you'll be able to select which of the users will be receiving things related to that. And the last bit of advice, don't think that other companies have it figured out. We have been working in this space for 4 years. I've talked to many people. There is such a giant spectrum from doing nothing to doing it brilliantly. And seriously, most people fall somewhere in the beginning of that spectrum, like either doing nothing or sending a simple hard-coded drip campaign, like a welcome sequence to people. And that's a shame because that means your marketing dollars are spent in vain. So don't be like that. Implement some kind of customer success automation, and that will very likely put you way ahead of many companies out there. We do have some resources. One is Better Done Than Perfect podcast, which we run with plenty of founder stories. Our current season is dedicated to email automation. The previous season was about customer success. So welcome to tune in. We have brilliant show notes, like executive recaps. And we also invite you to join Userlist. If you haven't received much funding, then you're welcome to join our startup program and get $500 in credit when you sign up. So welcome anytime, and good time for Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Jane. We have a few questions rolling in, and if anybody would like to add more, we can. I just wanted to, I have some questions too, so that I jump in first, maybe to make time, or maybe I'm just being selfish. But just to make sure, like, I don't want to make too many assumptions. Like, what's your definition of customer success? I know it's not support. You said it's not support. But like, what's the defining characteristic of customer success?
Oh, you're really zooming out of this, aren't you?
Wait.
It's the ability to proactively do something that will improve the value that the customers are receiving from your tool. Whatever proactive measures that could be, either automated, basically make sure they have access to everything they need in any fashion, or building personal relationships, talking to them in person, doing concierge stuff, whatever that means for your tool.
Got it. Cool. That makes sense. Yeah. And
what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. And it's because I think we do, at least I often think of success in the context of how it's similar or dissimilar to support. I think support is a very inbound, reactive medium, where I see success as more outbound, proactive. So how can you identify a problem before it's a problem? If you identify a worrying trend, like for example, if a customer hasn't signed into their account in a week or a month or something like that, that might be concerning. Or if we notice that there are errors going on with their account, or if we notice that they're not using a feature, or whatever's happening, something weird is happening. Or we've released something new that we think would be really beneficial to them. And Baremetrics has all sorts of add-ons that will, not to oversell, but like make you money like while you sleep with the click of a button type thing. So we're like, but very few of our customers, like only about 30% of our customers use that. So that's an area too of like, hey, would you like some more money? And like, that's not always a straightforward conversation to have. So that's how I've always thought about success of like, it's an outbound, it's proactive, and it's either to head off an issue that, might fester in the background and eventually cause churn, or it's to make sure that people are getting the most out of your product, both from a feature and add-on and all, from that perspective.
It's interesting that both Baremetrics and Userlist belong to this category of tools that are somewhat set and forget. So you can't judge the customer success by them logging into the app. And it makes the whole process even more tricky. Like they can be perfectly happy and satisfied, but not log in to the app because they're using your, Slack widget to see their stats daily, things like that.
That's a great point. And one of the other things you said early on, I don't know if you have data around this. I was curious if you did, but like one of your very first steps of the onboarding flow that you had was try to book a call. I think that's like, if you can actually have a conversation with a customer, that's where you can start to learn some of these things of like, oh, well, I use Baremetrics to prepare our board meeting notes. And those board meetings happen quarterly. So if I don't see the customer for 3 months, that's fine. As long as they log in at least every 3 months, I know they're still getting the value that they're looking for out of the product. But do you have data on booking those calls? Does that have any direct benefit, or does it have the benefit where you just better understand who your customers are, and you can build everything else around that?
It really depends on the tool. We use onboarding calls heavily at Userlist because our tool requires a little bit of thinking to start with. So if we can get on the call with the customer and instill a couple of key ideas, discuss how they can be applied to their product, that can dramatically improve their chances of success. That's why we're doing it. If you're on a Calendly, you probably don't need onboarding calls as much, Right. And also another angle to those onboarding calls, just learned it a few months ago from Ashutosh of Sansama, which is a productivity tool. They set up onboarding calls to the closer to the end of the trial, meaning the people they have calls with have already successfully used the tool for a couple of weeks. And this is a completely different flavor of the conversation because they already have opinions about the tool and the way they use it. Mm-hmm. So it has substance to it, as opposed to the onboarding call, which is a bit like training, because typically the person being onboarded still haven't done much on their own with the tool.
Interesting. Seems like a high risk, high reward move. So you're if they get into the product and they use it and they understand it, then those calls are probably super useful. But somebody who gets stuck, you don't want to leave them for too long. I'm getting the sun is coming through my windows. That's why I'm
Sansama is really straightforward to start with. Like it's really simple. It's like step by step simple. So
cool. Awesome. Let's jump to. We have a couple of questions here. So. One of the questions is kind of specific and tactical. You were talking in the context of sending customer emails. And the question was, for these types of customer communications, do you find rich text emails work better than HTML-rich emails? In other words, an email more stripped back of images. No images, somewhere in between.
I don't have an opinion. But I don't have precise data, but I have a very strong opinion, but you should take it with a grain of salt there. Okay. So our opinion and philosophy at Userlist is that the content of the email matters most. And it's the kind of communication you're trying to build, which reminds of the personal communication while being automated, but no party is pretended it's personal, but it still wants, like, you're not making signatures like sent from my iPhone kind of level scam, but you still want them sound personable. For that, a little to no design works best. However, there are certain companies that prefer it branded. It can be as simple as like a logo on top, or it can be complex layout. Really depends on the kind of message you want to get across. If you are like an HR B2B tool who serves enterprises, maybe you would prefer something more, enterprisey in your styling. Yeah. But we are big fans of simple email. Really, it's the best way forward.
Cool, awesome, great. Another question: why do you think so few SaaS companies are doing automated customer success communications well?
Lack of resources. Lack of resources. Yeah, it's definitely lack of resources, because it feels like it's not so directly tied to revenue as customer acquisition. So marketing always gets the budgets, the eyeballs, and the efforts. And customer success is always like, all right, they're paying, that's fine. And you never know what's behind the scenes. So of course, there's still many companies who are doing it right and well. It's just that with early stage companies, unfortunately, it's really overlooked. So if you can fix that, that'd be great.
Awesome. Cool. I have one other question in our Q&A list. If anybody else has any more questions, now's the time to fill it up. But we will go into this next question. How would you recommend we go about persuading stakeholders to invest in technology that will enable us to implement automated communications like this? Stakeholders are likely to want to see data that investing in automation tech will pay off. So any tips on how to estimate the impact?
Yeah, how do you estimate the impact without doing the impact yet? Right. You can't. You have to trust it for a second.
Yeah, I would, the way that we did it, because we just hired 2 people on the success side, and yeah, I think for us there was a matter of faith involved. Mm-hmm. And so I think a part of it's just we wanted to be better educated. So we knew for a fact that our customers weren't using all the features. So because we would frequently have cancellations, and they would say something to the extent of well, I really like Baremetrics, but I just wish it had segmentation. And it's segmentation is one of our biggest features. Or I wish I could add my own data, or I wish I could run a cancellation survey of my own, or whatever. So we would constantly see cancellations for the reason stated that a feature that we already have. So that's a great example of, we needed to be more proactive in the communication to help train them and show them around the product. It's a huge product. But then we also have, there's also the financial side. If we have these add-ons that very few people are using. So until we implement the systems that we implement, we don't know which percentage, what percent of the audience will capture. But we could do things what if our success team could get adoption of our Recover add-on from 30% to 50%? What's the actual hard, monetary impact of that? Or what if we could increase our conversion ratio, our trial conversion rate? Or what if we could hold off some of the churn that's happening, or something like that? So that's the way we did it. Is certainly, like you're saying, there's a little bit of a leap of faith involved. But that's how we kind of started to wrap some numbers and some goals for this newly formed team. Okay, here's where we want to go. And then certainly after 3, 6, 12 months, we'll have to reevaluate once we actually implement the systems. And we thought the same thing that you mentioned of we could send an email and say hey, sign up for this add-on, it's free money. And then everybody would do it. And then as it turns out, some people read the email, most people didn't read the email. But they also weren't ready they hadn't heard from us in years. So they weren't ready to engage that way. So a part of it too is you have to build that foundation that you can then build off of from there.
The thing is, the version 1 of automated customer success is basically mimicking a founder who will check in with the new trials and asking them how they're doing. Is it better to ask them how they're doing or stay silent? Of course, it's better to ask them. Can you ask every 100 trials that come every month about that? Of course you can't. So for $100 per month, you can be doing it at scale without doing manual work. That is a no-brainer leverage you can get with the software. So you don't even have to think about improving anything, because it's obviously much better than just staying silent with people. Sure, people might not read the email, but they might do. So
yeah, it's interesting because we kind of we operate with the null hypothesis mentality within like Baremetrics and like all of the portfolio companies that we're around with, which kind of goes against that, which sort of says like, assume that any change that you might make is bad. Like assume that there's a negative effect. So, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't experiment. That actually means you should experiment, but don't walk into a change assuming that it's going to be better. But we still went forward with implementing this program. So I guess I'm not quite sure how to justify, like you can operate with imperfect data, but you still need to be able to run the experiment. There may be, probably not, but I think there might be a company on earth that actually it would be better not talking to their customers than talking to their customers. Like maybe just one in the world of like, you know what, actually probably should just leave them alone. So you should always be in the mindset of experimentation. But yeah, I do agree with you. It's like, well, you know, categorically, are we moving in the right direction? Like, are we helping people before they come to us and churn, or are we waiting until they churn? Like once a customer comes to you and says, I want to cancel, there are mentalities that you can save them, and there's like different systems you can do, but they've really already made up their mind. They've already been having a bad experience for a pretty long period of time, and they're ready to get the heck out of here. So I think that there's a lot of soft benefit around being proactive with these systems as well.
I like that you mentioned that the change is a negative kind of thing, and that probably relates to more mature companies like the one you're running at the moment. There's a principle called Chesterton's fence when it was about like a new governor or somebody that started heading the village, and they were like, oh, why is that fence in the middle of the road? It's blocking something. Let's remove it. And the principle says before removing something, you really need to make sure you know what it was there for. So that's one of my most interesting favorite UX sayings, is basically just before saying something about the change, make sure you know why it was done before. That way.
Absolutely. What was the punchline? Was the fence there to like prevent like a bull from?
It did something very important, but I forgot what.
Something foundational that whoever built the. It's like that with software a lot too. I feel like it's like, oh, like why is this code so messy? We can pull this out and clean it up, and then they deploy that change. You're like, oh well, now it doesn't handle this scenario, so they add something back in, and like, oh well, what about this use case? And like, oh, then they add it back in, and then all of a sudden they're back to this like messy code that works. One other note from the questions is that specifically around impact LTV variance from tools and churn as well. I agree. I think those are two critical long-term predictors to measure of like whether or not implementing the system is a success. But also the LTV is a pretty hard one to measure immediately. If you're, I guess you could pitch it if you're pitching leadership. You'd be like, yeah, this is going to increase LTV by 35%, and then you have like a year to actually get there and figure out if you've actually made that sort of change. Another question here. So, and then now this is the last one. So if anybody else has any questions, once we run out of roadway, we'll wrap up. The question is, can you talk about a positive success experience you've had with a customer? What about it felt helpful / awesome?
Is not with a customer, but as a customer. I'm saying it's Leia's question. So basically, was I delighted as a customer?
Yes.
Of course, we all remember negative stories. Come on. No. I had an interesting experience with a Superhuman demo a couple years ago. And I think I've seen you use Superhuman, right, Brian?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I was not delighted by the way I was brought on a call with the representative. And then their process of getting people do what they want was so strict that they never really wondered, like, who am I? What am I doing? Why I'm here? And they basically made me open my inbox, which is a very private area, and do something there right away. And then when they hung up on the call, they charged my card also, which I didn't really want. Like, I was on the verge of using and not using the tool, and they just went ahead and charged me. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting. Like, conversion rate optimization at best. It was, and then at the same time, Superhuman. It's been like a textbook case study about, efficient onboarding. So as you are striving to make your onboarding efficient, don't forget there are humans on the other side. So that's the lesson, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. So yeah, I onboarded with Superhuman just like 6 months ago. And I think I definitely had a better experience than you had. Like, they actually spent time talking to me about, like, okay, well, why are you using this sort of tool? Like, what makes you, why do you want to pay for email? Seems like a crazy thing to do. And so I feel like they spent a little bit more time, but they did do all the same stuff of going into the inbox and like actually forcing me to, like, okay, like, yeah, you're gonna use this tool. And I know it's, I imagine their challenge is that people want to make some email improvements, but they don't actually like make it their primary inbox and make it go there. So, but it did feel like they, I didn't have that same exact experience of like the dehumanizing aspect of what it sounded like you went through, which is certainly awful. I think it sounds like they iterated on that and improved that component, but they kept a lot of and I don't remember when I got charged.
Yeah.
But I didn't keep an eye on that. Maybe they charged me right away too.
I'm trying to actually answer Leia's question and think about positive experience, but I can remember a recent positive customer support experience, which was with Livestorm, the webinar software we're using at the moment. We were integrating Google Analytics component, and Google Analytics just redesigned recently. And basically all the documentation, everything just stopped being legit. And they were like, oh, we'll take it to the developer team. And then they got back to me in 1 or 2 days with a solution. And it was delightful that they catered to our needs, because as somebody who runs a software business, having developer team do something in the course of 1-2 days, it is delightful.
Yeah, super hard to do, but great when it happens. It's great when a customer kind of gives you the underhanded pitch of something that's very important to them, that's also very easy to do, and you can knock it out quickly. And that always feels great. Yeah, it's a lot easier to figure out the challenging customer experience in customer support scenarios. Like, that's much more present, right?
How about you, Brian? Have you had a delightful success experience?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I have this thought in the back of my mind that I was interacting with some business, and that I was just so, and maybe my expectations were low. I was just so shocked that everything went smoothly. But I can't remember what it is. I remember I changed bank accounts. And I know historically that maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Usually that's just such like a pain to go from one bank to another bank, and banks are kind of notoriously difficult. And that was like, again, it's not like an amazing experience, but yeah, I called up and then I said like, hey, I want to cancel. And they said like, oh, well, you still have money on your account. I'm like, can I just transfer it? They're like, yeah, just transfer it. I was like, okay, cool. I transferred it. And then like called back 5 days later. I'm like, okay, I want to cancel again. And they're like, okay, cool. Great. You want us to like shut your cards down and stuff? And I said, yes. And they said, okay. And
done.
Then, yeah. I'm like, oh, there's a charge on your account for insufficient balance. I'm like, you told me to transfer the money. They're like, yeah, we sure did. We'll take care of that for you. So I don't know. It wasn't like an amazing experience, but I think like some of those things of like, well, I expected it to be worse and more time consuming, and it actually turned out to be pretty straightforward. And I felt good that, those cards were deactivated and all that sort of stuff. It was like a reasonable experience, but I should have come more prepared with like a great experience somewhere where somebody really like powered me up to use the product better, and I got more out of it and it was more valuable for the company, but nothing quite comes to mind right at the moment.
I think we have a little question from Aaron.
Yes. Any synergy with Userlist and Baremetrics? Both tools look pretty slick. Well, hey, thanks, Aaron.
Nice, thank you, Aaron.
I don't think so. The only thing I could imagine that we could do within Baremetrics is that we can filter, because you can augment your customer list, which is your user list, which or not your user list, your user list, your customer list in Baremetrics. So maybe we could like feed in like a list of customers that you might be interested in messaging to for a specific reason. But I think you also sort of capture like product behaviors and those sorts of things as well. So maybe you could use Baremetrics to determine if user list is actually increasing some of these metrics that you're interested in. Of like, you can annotate in Baremetrics when you started using user lists, and then like, okay, did LTV go up or did it go down? Did churn go up? Did it go down? That might
do
be.
Do you have a Zapier integration?
We do, yeah.
Oh, that means you can channel. We can do a lot of things probably then.
There you have it.
Channeling data. There's a war story actually. I'm not sure if it's good to share now, but Baremetrics about a year or some ago had an experiment with customer messaging, which Userlist does. You didn't really take it too far, did you? Because you decided to focus back on analytics.
Yeah, it's something that we still have and something that we use internally. And I think we have a couple of customers that use it.
Yeah, cool.
But as you're aware, it's kind of like a full-time job to build a messaging app. So.
For a while we were really stressed that such a big competitor is doing something that we are doing. And we were like, oh wow, that's something's big's coming along. Yeah,
it's hard. So we have no, I can reveal, we have no roadmap to work on that in the near term. So you're safe and developing a great lead ahead of us from that perspective.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Brian, for doing the Q&A.
Sure. Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So the recording should be available to everyone who's joined us, and even those who didn't join will still receive the recording. If you want to join Userlist, we're all there to do customer success on you to make you successful. And same for Baremetrics, I guess.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.